is there a way to say vomit without sounding
I feel like
gross?
there's so many. I think booted sounds horrible. I think
Chucked, upchucked,
gross.
puke.
Puke is the worst. I don't know why.
It's just gross. It's the ook.
I think the best way you can say it is got sick.
I got sick.
I don't know though, but if you say there's two ways to say it. You say,
is that a grammatical thing though?
Well, I think that
I
if
got
you
sick.
You're right. I think if you say, yeah, I'd been working for a week at this place and I got sick. Nobody know. But if you say, I pulled over at an Arby's and got sick.
Yeah.
It's all about the context.
You get that. Let's go with got sick, because I feel good about saying that. It's not one of those steaming things that I'm going to say a certain word over and over again. So
Yeah.
I have a close friend who has 5 children. So when I have 1 child. So the difference in like your toleration for what is clean and what isn't is very different, I think. So they had arrived, and as they came out of the car, the person presented some clothing in a bag. It's like, all right, so someone in the car had gotten sick, and some of the gotten sick was on the piece of clothing, and said, don't worry. I was like, okay, well that's fine. I'll put it in the garage wash. She's, no. It's just got a little on there. And for me, with 1 child, there's a zero. It's either.
That's right.
It's either 100% clean.
It's binary.
Yeah, and I'll say the V word. Any percentage of vomit immediately makes that item of clothing totally unusable. But for someone with 5 children, there's amount of toleration that goes with.
Right.
And
it's just a little bit.
Yeah. And I was like, no, it's a zero. You either are, I'm not a little bit in outer space.
Right.
I'm not kind of walking on the sun. You don't dip your toe in it. It's either 100% clean. And the punchline to me was there was a bag presented to me also. And the person said, your wife might want to put that. I don't think she'd want that inside. Like it was my wife's fault for being so uptight that she wouldn't want a bag of intestinal discomfort. It was like, yeah, I think I'll go ahead. I'll just put that in the outside bin. We'll do that.
Well,
so
your wife's very fancy.
She is. She's a fancy lad.
She lives high on the hog. Back on the
beef.
Which
reminds me of you were there for a very momentous night in my life, where I ended a 14-year streak that started when I was 4 years old. Yeah. 14-year streak of not getting sick.
Oh, I think for this we have to use the real word.
Yeah, go ahead, because I know there's a limerick that goes with it or a rhyme.
This was the night of the vomit comet.
I became.
I remember this.
The vomit comet. So
you were sick very often that night.
I trained myself. I hated not that anyone likes getting sick, but I hated it so much that I had trained my body to not do it, and it took food poisoning at a Kmart.
I was about to say, I think we should clarify that this was not a night of debauchery and drinking. This was, I remember. I feel like. Did you had like a bad icy or something at the Kmart?
Close. I remember that night because I got a chance to look at it often. I had that night at the Kmart. For to admit to anyone listening to enrich the story, I wasn't just any position in the Kmart. I worked in the shoe section. Of my snack that night was a pretzel, a hot pretzel, and a rancid chocolate milk.
I'm about to get sick just based on this description.
Yeah.
You were first of all, I mean, Kmart. I don't know that they were known for many things. I don't know if they were known for their footwear.
Yeah. The most interesting thing at Kmart was not who came to buy shoes, but actually the people that came in to steal shoes. And a large percentage of my time was spent scouting people who came into Kmart, and it happened. And the method was,
I believe it.
You tried on shoes, and as your shoes were tried on, you put your old shoes in the shoe bin or in the shoe box and put it back in and made a quick escape.
Yeah, grab a chocolate milk.
And before you judge anyone who steals shoes from Kmart, you gotta give them credit or feel bad for the guy, me, who failed in stopping people from stealing shoes.
It's not worth it, man. I wouldn't try either, honestly.
Well, they didn't instruct me like risk my life. It wasn't like,
right.
Throw yourself out there.
You're right. All right. We're going to bring on this first idiom. You ready?
Hit me.
So the first one we're going to do tonight is Saved by the Bell.
Saved by the Bell.
Yes, sir. So what's the first thing you think of? It's probably the first thing I think of as a child of the 90s, Saved by the Bell.
So I know it's not the root of it, but get the elephant in the room out of the way was Saved by the Bell, the TV show that I don't know if watched is a term, absorbed. It was there. It was on. And I know a lot of people my age and maybe a little older, a little younger did too. That just was out there. I don't even know what you describe that as. Was it a sitcom for children or?
It was its own category.
It was something.
They had to. There were some other shows that came after it that tried to like rip off the formula of bad acting, terrible writing, laugh track, but nothing captured the magic of Saved by the Bell. I don't know if you remember how much your brother was into that show. Are you aware of that? It
sounds about right.
It may have been when you were in. So when that came out or when that was playing, were you in high school or in college? Or
I think it was high school.
Okay.
So one of my most distinct memories is actually being in college and coming back in the early 90s and walking through the dorm, and it was on everyone had it on their TV. Now people weren't like absorbed watching it. It was just there. It was only like comfort food. It was kind of like meatloaf or soup on a cold day.
There is something comforting about it. I don't know what it is, but so I remember when I think about Saved by the Bell, I think about getting off of school in high school, going to your house, getting a bowl of cereal with your brother, standing there eating cereal, watching Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
It wasn't funny. The stories, well, there was you have to give it to
There was something about it though.
There was something about it. I don't know what it was, but to this day, I mean, if I see YouTube videos of, well, there is actually have you seen Zach Morris's Trash? Mm-hmm. It's pretty good.
It is, and it's very accurate, and it's one of those things that when you look at it through an adult's eyes, you go, you're correct that he was a terrible person. I think the thing that's interesting about that show too is that the amount of people that actually had like lasting careers out of that.
That's a great point.
Most people out of that show, the percentage, the batting average of people that had jobs was pretty good. Pretty much everybody except Lisa Turtle and Screech.
Lisa Turtle.
I thought she would have been the person that probably would have had the best career out of that.
Yeah, you're right, because the worst acting in it was Zach, but he ended up landing NYPD Blue. He had a few movies.
Yeah. And he's still out there. He's got a good... I mean, he's a working actor still.
It wasn't really a great show, but it passed the time, like you said. And you have to remember, this was before on demand. I mean, right now, you come home as a high schooler, and you can either go ahead and rewatch like Breaking Bad on Netflix. You can play Fortnite or Call of Duty or something. You have so many options. We had like Super Mario Brothers or Saved by the Bell, but I want you to now think.
So, Saved by the Bell.
Where did that come? Why would they name a show called Saved by the Bell?
Right. So that go back to our friend Pearce Egan, who turned out to do a lot of writing on boxing. I don't know if I'd mentioned before. Did some more research on him. He was the guy that actually coined the term "the sweet science" to refer to boxing. Yeah.
I did not know that.
But Saved by the Bell's gotta mean when you're in a boxing match and you're down, they're counting you out. And before the match ends, before you get counted out for being knocked out, the bell would ring, and you could be saved by the bell. That's what I've always thought it meant. It went back to boxing
So
which a lot of these seem to do. And again, I enjoy going through these just to flash back to the time where your options for entertainment were the theater, boxing,
horse racing,
wood fairies.
Right. So
we're dying.
This is going to be satisfying. This is going to be one of the ones where we say, yes, Saved by the Bell does come from boxing. And I'll talk about that a little bit. I'll tell you, congratulations that you got that, because I thought and this is dumb, but I thought it had to do with you're in class and the bell rings before you have to like answer a question, right? So
okay. Well, that goes back to the show.
My first exposure to the phrase Saved by the Bell was the show Saved by the Bell. I knew that they wouldn't just call a show Saved by the Bell for no reason. And so I intuited that it was because you're sitting in class and, the teacher, I mean, this literally comes from the song, by the time you grab your books and you give yourself a look, you're at the corner just in time to see the bus drive by. But I thought it was the bell rang and you didn't have to answer the question. That's not it either.
Do you know, since we talked about Saved by the Bell, unfortunately you've knocked something loose in my head. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the original title of that show?
I do. What? Don't tell me.
Okay.
It was Good Morning, Miss Bliss.
Yeah. Okay. I knew Miss Bliss was in there.
Miss Bliss. It was I believe it was Good Morning, Miss Bliss. Right. Mm-hmm. It debuted on the Disney Channel, and it was Haley Mills.
Yep.
And so Haley Mills did the original Parent Trap. Mm-hmm. Great movie. I just told my friend Giovanna the other day, because she was saying she was going to have some wine and watch the Parent Trap. I was like, you need to watch the original Parent Trap, right, which she was very aware of. All right, so Saved by the Bell. If you ask many people what Saved by the Bell means, they're going to come at you with something totally different. And by the way, I would like to give credit to a website that I do. So when I do my research, there's a bunch of different places I go, but I realize there's a website that comes up a lot called disappearingidioms.com. And I highly recommend this website. The guy that runs it is actually a very good writer, and he does his research, and I absolutely rip off his research to do these podcasts. So Saved by the Bell, I also realized that I pretty much completely kicked the bucket from his website as well. So go to disappearingidioms.com, and one of the things I learned from his website was the origin theory that I'm going to debunk, which is the fun one, and it's rigged coffins.
That's the fun one.
Yeah, it would have been good for the Halloween episode, but get this. So this is fun because it has, as on Disappearing Idioms, he mentions that there's some truthiness to this, which is go back in the day to the 1800s, the late 1700s, early 1800s. We've talked about blowing smoke. We've talked about, listen.
Medical practices were pretty sketchy, and the science pretty dubious, and a lot of just like, let's give try this out and see how well this works.
Exactly. And so there was a little thing called cholera, which was an epidemic, and there were instances of people being pronounced dead, put in a coffin, and, coughing and sitting up.
Yeah.
Going, what are we doing? So it so freaked people out that they began creating these coffins that were rigged with like windows, so you could see. So you could see that you were buried alive. So that people could see in case you sat up. Yeah. So they had like tubes going down with oxygen, just in case.
Right.
But most importantly, a bell. So a rope or string down to a bell that one could ring if they found themselves waking up in the coffin.
Oh gosh.
And by the way, this wasn't like just some thing that a very small part of the population was worried about. This was actually a big deal. So there is a thing called taphophobia, which is fear of being buried alive. And
doesn't everybody have that fear?
Yeah, and that's exactly. So here's some great quotes. All right, you ready for this? So Lord Chesterfield, his quote was, "All I desire for my own burial is not to be buried alive." This is in 1769. Mm-hmm. George Washington said on his deathbed, quote, "Have me decently buried, but do not let my body be put into a vault in less than 2 days after I'm dead."
Yeah. Well, they did a good job of that. Didn't they pretty much bled him to death to make sure you didn't have to worry about that?
Yeah. So, so these were real devices, though. I mean, there are actually patents out there registered in both England and the United States all the way to 1955. The improved burial case. There was a patent in New Jersey with a bell on it. So, I mean, you can't blame them for being freaked out about this. So the idea being saved by the bell is you got buried alive, ring-a-ding-ding, Zach Morris comes in.
Yeah. Screech is probably in the graveyard anyway.
Screech is just there in case. So there you go. So it's not that. It's definitely something that you'll hear. I don't think this was in the Life in 1500s email, but it's that type of thing where it's...
Well, it's like, what's the phrase? Any good lie has a good part of truth to it.
There's some truth to it.
Yeah, so there was that. And frankly, based on what we've learned just going through these things about medical practices, it probably wasn't the worst idea that people had.
Yeah, it's like blowing smoke. I mean, the blowing smoke thing is real. This is real. If you haven't listened to Blowing Smoke, you need to go back and listen to it. You'll know what we're talking about. All right, so this is from boxing. So what happened was back in the mid-1800s, they decided they needed, because boxing, as we have discussed, was such a big deal. Boxing, horse racing. What's the third one?
Boxing, horse racing.
The theater.
Theater. Dying.
So the Marquess of Queensberry rules specified many things because they were trying to get some rules around boxing. And one of them was, if a boxer gets a knockout blow, they're down for the count. If the fighter is unable to regain his footing during the count, which is 10 seconds, he's declared out by the referee, therefore losing the match. However, if the ringside bell signaling the end of the round sounds before the count is over, the fighter is said to be
Saved by the Bell.
Yes. So that is what Saved by the Bell came from. This whole thing about being in a coffin while fun is not true. There are no records of anyone ever being saved by the bell. However, these things did get sold.
Yep. And back then, I would gladly put my 9 pence or nickel or whatever. Wait a minute, nickel, that's too much. It could be like a week's wages.
It's good enough for George Washington. It's good enough for me. All right, Steve, you ready for the next one?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to do Off the Hook.
Off the Hook.
So what do you think of when you hear Off the Hook?
So 2 things pop in my mind, kind of like the Saved by the Bell one. One 90s reference, and one probably what the answer is. So I'll go first with what I when I hear Off the Hook, I'm thinking of fishing.
Mm-hmm.
You've thrown a hook into the water. I'm describing what fishing is. You're fishing. You use a hook to fish. You're stuck on a hook as a fish. Good for the fisherman, bad for the fish.
Are you a big fisherman?
Can't you tell by the way I so naturally discuss the process of fishing?
Right. You put a hook. It's like a Brian Regan. The hook. The fish goes on the hook. Yeah.
So Off the Hook is a reference to what, if you're a fish and you've been hooked, it's very good to be off the hook.
Why? Oh, well, because they live. Yeah, so basically you're off the hook. You're free.
Yeah, you're free. There's not a hook in your mouth, which is good.
So, for example, it would be something like your mom says, hey, I want you to clean out my car. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh, I got to go. You're off the hook. You don't have to clean out the car. Yep. Or it's something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
I have a lot of trauma with having to clean out my mom's car.
Were hooks involved?
Let me think. No, but I felt like I was off the hook. That reminds me, this is nothing to do with this episode, but I have to tell this story because I'm thinking about idioms and things my mom said. I remember being probably in like 4th or 5th grade, and my mom telling me that she couldn't make it to her hair appointment because the lady that did her hair was all tied up. And I remember thinking, literally,
yeah. Well,
we should call somebody. Like,
yeah.
I thought she was all tied up. That's probably why I remember it, because it was so jarring. I was, what? And then I was like, she's tied up. And then Mom explained it to me. So Off the Hook.
Maybe she was into kombucha.
Korean barbecue.
Yeah,
maybe. So
Off the Hook. So fishing, and the other thing I'm thinking of is I'm gonna spell this out, not more off ta hook or off THA hook, like a 90s sort of, I'm picturing like a TLC video where something is going very well and you are off THA hook, which I think also was a spelling. I remember, what was it, Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Don't act like you don't know who they are. Come
on. THA Crossroads, or the... Wasn't that one of their songs?
The Crossroads?
No, THA.
Yeah, the.
Yeah. That's not a word. That's why I spell it out.
Off the cross.
Off THA hook. Off THA chain.
Yeah. Now, okay. Right. So this is why I wanted to do this one, because off the hook as a fish and getting out of an obligation is obvious.
And it's a good. You've gone from a negative situation to a positive situation.
Right. But when I was researching this, and the reason I wanted to do it was because off the hook for fishing, that takes 2 seconds. It's not an episode. But why did it become slang for something that was cool? So I'm doing research, and I find Wiktionary.org, which is one of the places you find idioms, and the etymology 3 adjective, off the hook, meaning not comparable or comparable. The first example they give is, that's 5 3-pointers in a row. Smith is off the hook. Which reminds me of like NBA Jam or something. You know, like, he's on fire. He's off the hook. So
that sounds like when like your dad or anyone's dad or myself finds like a cool phrase and tries to fit it in there.
We are.
But you're right. So off the hook went from getting out of obligations to a 90s urban way to celebrate. Things were going very well. This party was off THA hook.
And I never got it because I'm like, off the chain. If you think about off the chain, like for me, it's like, it's untethered. It's the party's so off the chain that it's like a dog that's off his chain and he's, but even then I'm like, it's like 3 sheets to the wind. It doesn't really make sense. You're like,
yeah.
What does that actually indicate? Would you like to know?
Please.
So the normally useless Urban Dictionary, actually I think may have gotten one here. So basically off the hook, according to Urban Dictionary, and this is the thing that makes the most sense to me, is that it's referring to something being so fresh and new that it's literally right off the store shelf.
Is it dope and fly also?
No, it's just, no, dope, that's another episode. And fly is another episode. But it's like saying something is off the store shelf. So it's right off the hook, meaning like the hanger. Oh. It's fresh. It's cool. It's off the hook. I sound so white and old right now, but
it's okay.
But that's I think where it came from. Why else would it be said as slang like that? It's fresh. It's new. It's
dope. It's fly. It's crunk. It's.
I never thought I'd hear you say crunk. I'm so happy right now.
Yeah. This new Mary J. Blige jam is off THA hook.
But can I love Mary J. Blige. She is off the hook. So I probably wouldn't have chosen this one, but something came into focus as I was doing some research last week, which was we have talked a lot about Pearce Egan. So the 1700s, 1800s had Pearce Egan. The 1600s had Samuel Pepys. We have these writers who bring new words into our lexicon, new phrases, like Tom Wolfe. I think that now what we have is Guy Fieri. Guy Fieri, when I hear off the hook, I think of him talking about some fly new, out of bounds restaurant and some greasy spoon somewhere, and he's talking about how something's off the hook. Flavortown, out of bounds, shut the front door. So I found this article. There are many articles, but I wanted to call out specifically the one. It's called The Daily Meal is the website, and Dan Myers is the editor, and he does an attempt to translate the 6 most common Guy Fieri sayings. So, Steve, before I go any further, what's your relationship with Guy Fieri?
Well, our relationship right now, we're not going public with anything. He's one of those people that, for some reason, there's this reflexive cultural thing that people want to like bash the guy. And there's a comedian by the name of Shane Torres that has a bit that I won't ruin that essentially starts with, why do people hate Guy Fieri for following his dreams? People bash the guy for having, dyed hair and wearing his sunglasses on the back of his head, but essentially loves food, helps small businesses, and is very enthusiastic about life in general and good things.
I agree wholeheartedly.
For some reason, people
hate on Guy Fieri, man. I have not heard this. I'm going to listen to it as soon as we're done here, but
again,
it's true.
Yeah.
People hate them because why? It's just like my love of Olive Garden. I want an Olive Garden.
You are a fan of the OG, and
why would I not be? It's delicious. When you're there, your family.
Just things you like.
You can go into an Olive Garden. You can have breadsticks, salad, and like never-ending pasta, and you can walk out for like $9.99. And is it the best Italian food you've ever had? Yes, it is. So any Olive Garden haters, I don't want to hear it. But Guy Fieri haters, I don't want to hear it either. So
please, it's your show.
All right, so I want to dig into some Guy Fieri sayings because I'm joking, but I'm also kind of serious. In 200 years from now, did you know?
He's the Pepys of our time.
He is the Pepys of our time. So let's just start with Flavortown. That is Guy Fieri's fiefdom, where the rivers flow with thick gravy and yada, yada, yada. Funkalicious. Gangster. When he calls something gangster, you know it's good.
You know it's off THA chain.
It's off THA chain. But my man Dan Myers does try to translate some of these. So I'm going to go down here let's start with This Is Gangsta. There are only so many ways you can say that something tastes good, and gangsta also implies that the dish is a bit subversive, like a macaroni and cheese stuffed burger. This is money. Not only tasty, but also of value to the chef and restaurant, like a signature house-made roast beef sandwich with fried eggplant mozzarella. I'm going to skip over, we're writing the bus to Flavortown. I feel like that's self-explanatory. But here we go. If something is out of bounds or off the hook, bring it back to off the hook, it's reserved for only the truly and sometimes surprisingly delicious food items. It's usually uttered in a somewhat reverent tone and followed by, this is honestly in the top 5, insert your dish name here, I've ever eaten.
So is that his big superlative? Is that the highest accolade that he gives?
I think off the hook is the highest accolade he gives, or out of bounds. He uses them interchangeably, but I mean, I would like to. I think when I think of off the hook, I think of Guy Fieri in some little out of the way hole in the wall where they're making like deep fried cheese with barbecue sauce, and it's the best thing he's ever had. By the way, do you know what his signature sauce is called?
No.
Donkey sauce. All right, so there you go. Off the hook. Both Off the Hook and Saved by the Bell is sort of getting out of something you didn't want to be in, and
and hopefully you can go to Flavortown from there,
and you don't vomit.
I got sick.